Welcome to Whatif tutorials. In this tutorial we will be looking at activity costing of labour. First of all, we'll be looking at the cost drivers. These are the variables which for an activity can determine the quantities required in terms of hours of operations. We'll be looking at adding a labour operation or labour operations to an activity. We'll be looking at labour shifts, which is an alternative to adding labour operations. You can add operations and shifts to the same activity. A shift consists of the number of weeks and the number of manning of that shift extended at an average hourly rate. Finally, we'll be looking at the analysis of labour costs across activities in a project. Let's go to projects. Here's one of our projects. We need to go into activity costing, and here we see the various activities, starting with at the top with the total and going down by header and by detail activity, header, detail activity, and the costs broken down in materials, labour, overhead, subcontract, other and total. We're going to be looking at labour, and we'll be looking at a particular detail activity where there is no labour, so we'll add some here. But before we do that, we'll have a look at cost drivers now. When you create an activity, there's a default driver called job, which is the quantity of 1, and this particular driver is the driver you have when there is no driver. So if there's an activity or an operation that you want to add that there is no obvious variable driving the quantity, then we'd use a job driver of 1. You'll see there's another couple of drivers that have been added already for this activity. If you want to add a further driver, you can click New, click Driver, and select from the driver list, say Windows, use driver, and put in the quantity of windows for this activity. Okay, so we've created our cost drivers. There they are. Okay, so we click on labour. The first thing we want to do is to add an operation, and this is an operation that, first of all, you'll notice the operation is by work centre. So this is the default work centre. You can add, or you can select another work centre there. The operation can be a standard operation if you have created standard operations for use, or it can be a non-standard operation. Right, now the operation defaults to the job driver, but we can select, let's say, use our new driver of Windows, brings in the quantity of 26. We now need to say how many elapsed hours were there or are there for this particular driver unit per window. It might be 0.5. We can repeat that operation if this operation may be repeated, so we can say yes, we'll repeat it twice, and we can define the efficiency, and we can then check the labour code that has been applied. Now this labour code here and this labour rate have been created in our master files, and these are the defaults for that work centre. But you can create or use other rate codes. We'll stay with this one for the moment. We then enter the manning for this particular operation. So there might be 2 people required. So this gives us our estimated man hours for the operation, starting with our 26 standard hours converted by 90% efficiency and multiplied by 2 people to give 57.78 man hours, and a labour cost, that is that divided by the labour rate of that. Now in overheads, as with labour, this is the standard overhead rate that's been applied to this work centre, and there may be other overhead rates that you can use, but this is the standard, and that gives us our overhead cost. Now finally we have the timeline. For each operation you can create a start and a finish date, which is different from the activity start and finish date, but logically is within the start and finish date of the activity. Click OK, and we then have our specifications. We can enter a long description and instructions as required. These are for internal use only. Okay, so we've now added our labour operation. So you see here, there's the sequence, here's the operation, the manning, standard elapsed hours, man hours, labour per hour, efficiency, and then our costs of labour, overhead rate, cost of overhead. So we've added an operation. Next, I want to show how we can add a shift. Before you can start doing this, you must have created configured shifts. This is covered in another tutorial, so we will assume you've seen that. We'll click on Add Shift. You can add a configured shift directly, or you can add for a specific employee. The difference here is you might just want to add one employee's shift over a period of weeks. In this case, you can have as many employees as you want on the shift. So we'll go for this one. Okay, these are the configured shifts I just referred to. They've been pre-created, and all they are is a means of determining, given the nature of the shift, that it's overtime assumptions, and other on-cost and allowance assumptions for that particular shift, we'll end up with a cost of labour per hour worked. So these are the costs that are applicable per hour for each of these shifts. So if we just select one of these shifts, it brings it in here, and here we can then finalise the shift's cost by determining the manning. We're saying, okay, we're going to have three men on this shift. Next we need to decide when the week begins. This particular shift is supposed to start on Mondays. Now we can say how many weeks we want it to start, to apply, and then we decide when we want it to start. So it has to start on a Monday. If we try to select a start date, we'll then be given over to this list of Mondays. So we can select, say, 2nd of June, because that's a Monday. We know that's a Monday. And so that's beginning the 2nd of June, ending the 14th of July, because we've determined 6 weeks. Or we might determine 7 weeks. So there you are. It's probably more like that, because in our activity timeline we're starting in March and ending in the 7th of July, so we probably wouldn't end this after the 7th of July. We can put some comments in here. So we are now adding the shift cost for 5 weeks for 3 men working on that shift. Okay, now it's giving you a chance to fine-tune that. This is the standard configured shift. You might want to even fine-tune that a bit more, maybe put in some hours here to increase the overtime, maybe put in some, or adjust some of the allowances, or add some more allowances if you want. You can add allowances. The on-costs are already determined when the shift was pre-configured, so we're not going to adjust those here. You can adjust the overtime factors too. So this then results in the final cost of the shift, and here we have it. We've added a shift determined consisting of 3 men working these hours, those man hours. There's the cost per man hour. The efficiency, we assume the efficiency is 100 here because we have actually determined that this is an elapsed period of time, so the efficiency doesn't apply. You can see over here that we've got the the start period and the end period. The repeat is the number of weeks, and 52 is the drive hours. Okay, so that is the shift operation that's been added to increase our total cost of labour. Alright, so lastly I'd just like to refer you to the analysis of labour. When you're looking at labour in the various activities, you can drill down and look into the labour, but you can't look at all of the labour across the project unless you go into project analysis labour. Now here you see the total labour of all the labour operations which have been added across activities. We just added 2 operations to activity 1, 2, 3 a moment ago, but there have also been these other operations added to these other activities. So you can see the total labour cost there. You can also select activities. You might select header activity, so and so. So these are the operations which have gone into the header, into detail activities within the header. So that gives you man hours, labour and overhead costs. If you click the total there, you can extract the data. So you can then run several reports: operations by date, operations by activity by date, accumulated labour by date. So you can see where your labour costs are going on a date or timeline basis. So that concludes this tutorial.